I don't know when this happened, but for some strange reason, the country seems to be under the impression that compromise is a dirty word, that trying to be bipartisan is a bad thing. They seem to have fallen into the idea that compromise essentially means beating somebody over the head until they go over to your side, which is like the Rush Limbaugh idea of compromise. And if they don't think that, they think that, as Grover Norquist famously once said, bipartisanship is date rape. Which, by the way, tough talk, Grover, but not very Christian-sounding talk. And now, I can sort of understand where you're coming from, because, I'll be honest, during the first part of his administration, Obama actually tried to reach out to Republicans and conservative Democrats over and over and over. After all, Obamacare is pretty much, the idea for the individual mandate comes from Bob Dole's healthcare plan from the 1990s. It's pretty much Romney care. But even though he bent over backwards time and time again in his first term, because he's the guy who ran on bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle, Republicans were already swearing to obstruct him even before he was inaugurated, swearing that, and I quote, "If Obama was for it, we had to be against it." So I get it. I understand how people can feel that there's no point in bipartisanship. There is no point in compromising, because the other side is not interested in hearing what you have to say. The other side isn't interested in working together. The other side's idea of compromise is you give up your positions and come over to where we are. We don't have to give up anything. You have to do that. I get that. But you know what the problem I have with that is? I keep seeing that same mindset from the left just as much as I hear it from the right. I'm looking at you, young Turks. Yeah, I'm looking at you. You guys feel the exact same way about compromise that Republicans do. You feel that liberals shouldn't have to compromise any of their values. Republicans should have to compromise and come over to where we are, because we're the ones that understand things. Hey, remind me again, how many people in the polls are still okay with, say, right-wing positions like on, the death penalty? Or military action? Things like that? Yeah, quite a few Americans are very much okay with the idea of the death penalty, or military actions in Syria, or taking a more hard-line approach to the Middle East that involves putting boots on the ground. And you can argue that's a terrible idea. We saw that in Iraq, or we saw that in Libya. Here's the thing. Us going into Libya, we went in with other Arab nations. We were actually pretty smart about this. Gaddafi was a dictator. We went in for the right reasons, and we got rid of him, and it was pretty well done. The problem was that we didn't prepare for the day after. That's the big problem that led to the chaos. Not us going in, but not getting ready for the day after is what killed us. So here's the thing, to everybody, you guys need to stop talking and start listening, because bipartisanship and compromise is actually incredibly important. And I'm going to explain why as we go all the way back to the Founding Fathers, to the Constitutional Convention of 1787. The Founding Fathers had gathered in the abnormally hot and humid summer of 1787 to draft a new American Constitution, and it would end up being the most successful ever written by human hands. At this point, Benjamin Franklin was the oldest member by about 15 years, being around, 81 years old. And remember, keep in mind, this was 1787. Living to 60 was a full and healthy life. all of them took their seats and they began to work and try and hammer out what exactly was going to be in the Constitution. And over the ensuing 4 months of drafting, a lot of Benjamin Franklin's own pet proposals actually, well, got tabled. Like, say, a unicameral legislature? Not quite. Prayers? Not quite. An executive council instead of a president? Not quite. And definitely no salaries for office holders. But he did, however, manage to bring 3 unique and crucial strengths to all of this. First things first, he was much more comfortable with democracy than most of the delegates that he was working alongside. He favored direct elections and trusted the average citizen, resisting anything that had anything to do with elitism. In fact, the Constitution he drafted for Pennsylvania, with its popularly elected single-chamber legislature, was the most democratic of all the new states. Second, he was the most experienced of all the delegates, familiar not only with the nations of Europe, but the 13 states as well. He traveled to all of them and learned how much they had in common and how much they differed. Therefore, he could bring the voice of experience, the guy who had been everywhere, done everything, and everyone, and knew far more than you do. Yeah, he carried himself smugly, but that's because he had every reason to. He literally was the most learned out of all of them, at least in terms of experience. But finally, the last thing he brought was the idea of enlightenment, tolerance, and the spirit of pragmatic compromise. As he famously said, both sides must part with some of their demands. We are sent hither to consult, not to contend with one another, as he famously put it. And this issue of compromise would become manifest in various specific ways. First things first, should Congress be directly elected by the people or chosen by state legislature? Would representation be based on population or equal for each state? And would the national government or the states' governments be sovereign? And the problem was, all of the delegates and all of America were very, very split on this issue. So, what were they going to do? Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth, both from Connecticut, finally created a compromise that, in a sense, blended what the large states wanted and what the smaller states wanted. The House of Representatives would get apportioned by population, whilst the Senate would get equal votes per state. This didn't exactly work out well for everyone because everybody kept complaining about how it wasn't what they wanted. Finally, Benjamin Franklin managed to work out, you guessed it, a compromise that mostly satisfied everybody. Representatives to the lower house would get popularly elected and apportioned by population, whilst the Senate, well, the legislatures of several states would choose and send an equal number of delegates. The House, in turn, would get to have primary authority over taxes and spending, the power of the purse, as it were, whilst the Senate would have the confirmation of executive officers and matters of state sovereignty. But even Benjamin Franklin had to compromise himself. See, he didn't want to give the power of vetoing to the president. He didn't want the president to be able to veto acts over Congress. But Franklin would get his wish that Congress would get to impeach the president if they really wanted to and they had enough votes. So eventually the drafting of the Constitution was finished, and Benjamin Franklin got to opine about the state of what they'd done. What did he have to say for it? Well, in essence, he said that, I agree to this Constitution and with all its faults, if they are such, because I think a general government is necessary for us, and there is no form of government but what may be a blessing of the people if well administered, and I believe farther that this is likely to be well administered for a course of years, and can only end in despotism, as other forms have done it before. In essence, he praised the Constitution Therefore, it's compromising, saying that this is a constitution because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best. But it was the one they had. It was a compromise. And he felt that that was the true spirit of democracy. Many people blasted this approach. They said it wasn't principled. It wasn't taking a stand. But you know what? Here's the thing. Benjamin Franklin was right. A stand for compromise is not the stuff of heroism. It's not the stuff of virtue. It's not the stuff of moral certainty, but it is the very essence of democracy. You can't always get what you want. I repeat that. To the modern time, you can't always get what you want. Alright? You can't, okay? Occasionally, you will have to find that you have to give up something you want, and other people have to give up something they want, so you can reach a compromise. It's called living in a country with people whose needs are not exactly yours. Get over it. And get over yourself.